Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spiritual Matters. My name is Roberto Chavarria, and I'm here joined by Patricia Summers. And we're excited to dive into today's topic, which is actually belief and faith. So we're going to dive into that together here. And thank you for taking time to watch this. Hopefully, every time before we start one of these episodes, we take a moment to just be with what we're going to be talking about and be with you who are going to be watching this and hoping that it really can serve and help. And today we're going to be discussing why belief matters, why faith matters on the spiritual journey, and why it matters perhaps to you, why it's important to consider and to examine beliefs. We're going to share some thoughts regarding the role of belief and faith in our lives and in our journeys, providing some clarifications from our perspective regarding the role that this can play. And finally, we're going to be diving into what we can do in relation to our belief systems and our beliefs that we hold in order to bring them to light, to have a new relationship with belief in a way that can bring us closer to this innate spiritual intelligence within us. So glad to be here. Patricia?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, wonderful to be with you. Tremendous. Thank you. And I actually, more or less, though this has been a challenge to consider, I think there's a tremendous service to be received and engaged with regarding examining our beliefs, because this has to be, for many of us, somewhat of a subliminal reality we've been living with throughout our life that's been evolving with us. And to bring it to the forefront, I think is very important, because to know where we're coming from is extremely valuable at a personal level, but also at an interpersonal level, because this is always what we're either have to extend to others or not, which is where we're coming from. And so to step back for a moment and consider, what are beliefs operationally? How do they function within our awareness and even within our lives in terms of what we feel compelled to do and where we feel compelled to go and why? So I think it's a really valuable conversation that I appreciate we're about to have together.
Yeah, we'll start maybe by talking about belief. And, when I consider belief, I know in my experience, as much as I've tried to distance myself from belief in my attempt to be present and to connect with this deeper spiritual intelligence, what I've found again and again is that belief is just present. It seems to be a very natural and intrinsic part of being human. In a sense, it's almost inevitable that we have beliefs. They sort of just arise, either consciously or unconsciously, from our experience. And of course, there's the beliefs that we adopt from our culture and our families, and that we're indoctrinated into just by being in the world, even before we even had the awareness to be able to kind of consider whether we adopt these beliefs or not as we were children. But even as adults, and even as people who are walking this path of spiritual development and trying to connect with this deeper spiritual intelligence that we refer to as knowledge, beliefs are almost, they're operating in the background whether we acknowledge them or not. I've come to see belief as almost they're like an intrinsic meaning-making system that our minds come with, right? Like there is the immense complexity of the world, of the universe, which we engage with. Then there's the mystery and the mysterious and ineffable part of life that is experienced more on an internal level, perhaps experienced on a relational level, but somewhat, if you've had these experiences, perhaps you can relate, they're a little bit beyond words, right? But somehow we have to make meaning of those. We have to make sense of those. We have to integrate them into our understanding, into how we operate in the world. And that's where belief emerges. Whether we will it to or not, once we start to put the ineffable into language, we start to codify that which is beyond understanding into some form of understanding. And this is okay, right? In a sense, this meaning making and sense making framework can help orient us to the physical world, to our participation in the physical world, in a way that doesn't keep us in this constant state of overwhelm in the face of this complexity. This meaning making framework of this belief system can help us orient and guide relationships, decisions, daily life. And they can also, play a role in how we orient and how we relate to the mystery of our lives. Now, we'll talk a little bit more in this episode of how that same meaning-making framework, that same belief system can assist us on that journey, but it can also get in the way of this journey of connecting directly with the spiritual intelligence, with God, and why that actually represents a potential problem. So those are my thoughts.
Wonderful. It's interesting because to step back and look at and consider for a moment operationally beliefs, why do they form and how do they serve us or not, right? One of the questions I've been living with is the relationship between our conscience and beliefs, right? Conscience. Let me just say this. For example, conscience, a question of conscience is, what do I hold to be true? Right? What do I know to be true? Right? And it makes sense that we can't be rethinking life every time we turn around and every second. There are some set truths or working truths that make sense that would serve us to be able to be aware of and to have in hand. And so even though beliefs can be somewhat subliminal and rather not considered, right? I think there's value in, as we go, present time at this point in life for us, to be on the lookout for them as they surface in our experience, take note of them, and maybe even put them over here in a little belief doc for us to review at some point later, if not in that moment. But what do I hold to be true? And again, this experience of conscience, because life is impacting us every moment. We're seeing what's happening worldwide, both, to the environment of the world, to the people of the world, to our emerging humanity, which is a race emerging into a larger framework of intelligent life potentially, right? So what's going on out there? And how do I see it and how do I experience it? And by the way, what supports me in the moment as I go? So what do I hold to be true? So these working truths may be forming, and that could be another term for beliefs for now. As beliefs stand to be reconsidered at some point, if we have the opportunity to, and hopefully take that opportunity to step back and look at them instead of, being an automatic, like an implement in society. I think there's a calling at the level of conscience for us to participate real time, but to have in hand some of the certainties we are acquiring, and also at some point re-examine them.
Yeah. And this is key. I think one of the key message points that I think I want to get across is that, the goal, I don't think, is to be without belief. There's a way in which we can get caught up in the idea of becoming beyond belief, right? Of like, I've let go of belief. I am without belief. And I feel like there's a way in which we can self-deceive ourselves in that regard, where we actually stop actually examining our beliefs. And if that's why recognizing that, in a sense, belief is a very natural part of being alive, of being human, that it's almost operating in the background, whether we will it to or not, whether we're conscious of it or not. That in a sense, even the attempt to be without belief generates new belief. accepting that's a reality, it allows us to have a new experience and a new relationship with our beliefs, so that we can perhaps reclaim these things, as you were speaking of, that we sense based on our experience that are true, but we don't hold on to them with a closed fist, just white knuckling those things, but instead we perhaps hold them with an open palm, allowing ourselves to reconsider, allowing our experience, our increased experience of the divine, of God, of knowledge, of the spiritual intelligence, of life, to allow us to re-examine our beliefs.
Correct.
And that will hopefully open us up to have a more real experience of reality as it's presenting ourselves, as of life as it's presenting it to ourselves, and of course of God's presence and our relationship with this deeper mystery, which we experience through this deeper spiritual intelligence directly.
Yeah, what you're talking about, in a way, it's a kind of a precious process of almost waking up to our experience. And, this process of reexamining beliefs, and asking ourselves, is our sense of reality coming from an array of beliefs that have been accumulating socially and culturally in our life, and even within our development, compared to what we're experiencing and actually observing and sensing in reality itself. So there's a bit of a calling here to come forward anew. If you consider yourself, I don't know what your backgrounds are, but for me, going back in time to maybe about being 6 or 7, sitting in a classroom led by one of the Sisters of Mercy, sweetly, just more or less having us engage with the catechism of our faith. This is before you even had an original thought as a kid, maybe sort of on your own. This stuff is being inserted right in front of you, versus for someone to be invoking or asking you about your experience. What was that like for you? The last time you got hurt, or somebody said something that hurt your feelings, what did that feel like to you? The self-knowledge journey, right? So often culturally, for all of us, many of us, this other process inserted itself culturally, in our own process of development. And so this reexamining of beliefs and where they have come from, and to what degree do they still serve us, and serve the greater environment of society at large. It's an interesting journey to take, and yeah.
Yeah. What you were saying there regarding the holding on to belief, the holding on to these truths that we see as we see them, and that's perhaps limiting our actual experience of reality. I want to put forth 2 working definitions of belief that I've kind of written for myself over time, and see if that helps to kind of anchor an understanding of it to an extent. Or I'll just share what's up for me. So one I use is an assumption made about God, reality, the world, others, or oneself that operates as a precursor to experience. So in that sense, belief can find its way so that before I'm actually experiencing, I'm actually present to life, there's belief, and it's operating there, and it's an assumption about what it is that I'm experiencing, right? Another way is like beliefs being ideas or assumptions, either conscious or unconscious, through which we filter experience and how we make sense of experience. So these 2 for me are what those capture for me is this reality that, in a sense, belief can become a filter of our experience. And it's like beliefs have a way which, if we don't hold them consciously, they can unconsciously narrow the aperture of experience. Before we even have a chance to experience life as it really is, to experience the greater mystery of life, already the belief is providing a filter. So we're not open to a new experience. We're not open to a new realization. We're not open to being challenged. We're not open to having an experience that goes beyond that which we can rationalize and explain. And of course, that limits us because, my goodness, the reality of creation goes far beyond our intellect's capacity to explain it, right? If we just tune into the deeper experiences of the mystery that we have within ourselves, which exists beyond language and beyond explanation, which is more, it is pure experience. It's not, I'm thinking about the experience. It's, I'm having the experience. Belief has a way in that kind of can block us from actually having this inner experience, which can lead to realization, which can lead to a deepening of our spiritual journey, of our spiritualization, can lead to a deepening of our engagement with this spiritual intelligence, which represents our direct connection to the Creator and all that is. So I think the core challenge here is in our relationship with belief. Are our beliefs conscious or are they unconscious? Are we aware of what our beliefs even are, or are we not? And both of those cases, I think, represent, I mean, they have certain risks and benefits, that can be associated with them, meaning even conscious beliefs can kind of work against us, but at least they are conscious. So as I was saying, these unconscious beliefs get in the way of experiencing reality directly without us even knowing. I mean, isn't that something to just pause and think that there might be assumptions that I consider that I am not even aware that there are assumptions that I'm making about everything I experience. And in a sense, that's a problem because this deeper spiritual intelligence, which we've been talking about in our episode in Spiritual Matters, it's in dynamic relationship to life. It's alive, right? It's like a river flowing in relationship to life, this knowledge. And so if we're limiting it based on unconscious beliefs, we're not even able to experience that knowing. So that's unconscious beliefs. And then conscious beliefs are those things that we actually choose to reinforce within ourselves. It's almost they become like repeated thoughts, like we just continuously, it's like we have a mysterious experience and then we put it into this box. Oh yeah, that was this. I immediately try to make sense of it according to my understanding, according to my belief system. Right? Whereas, can we just stay with the experience? Can we allow ourselves to remain in that place of continual participation in life without having to give ourselves the comfort of, oh yes, I know what that means and I know, how to fit it into my paradigm, right? And my belief system. And so I'll do that. And that can happen even with conscious beliefs. So the risk of self-deception here, I think, is strong.
So this is really worth considering, which is, do we want to take the time perhaps to stop and maybe consider two things: what we believe or what we may be believing to be true now and how we came together. Because when you think about it, if you haven't stopped to reconsider and to look back in time from early childhood on how one came together, that's an important practice or engagement at the self-knowledge level. I mean, you matter as a participant in life. Okay. You're generating experience between you and others every day. And so do you know where you're coming from? And is it worth perhaps taking a moment or some moments in time or a little bit of space and time to consider the operational elements, right, in your, quote, personality or sociology, but also your innate nature, and see what's been acquired, and then to begin to look and see what's really true for me and what isn't. I need to do a little bit of housekeeping, let's say, so that I can stay present time now, okay? And be careful with what I engage with in life, developmentally and from a standpoint of contribution. Okay. Because I think increasingly there's a calling for all of us to move into a position of contribution if we're able. And when I say if we're able, I respect that because there's a lot of haphazard experience that happens in life that has an impact on our development. But in terms of our relationship with our conscience or what we most deeply know now, it's wonderful to bring that to the fore and prioritize that as opposed to being reactionary or almost automatic, reflexive, right? So anyway, this is an opportunity for us to enter into original present time engagement, to be a participant in life now, to see what it is we know. Okay. And there are some operational truths for us and they may hold up until further notice. And there's value there because we can't rethink everything all the time. Mm-hmm. So operational truths or beliefs can serve us. But periodically we may get these signals that something needs to be reconsidered. Mm-hmm. There's this experience of quote, faith. Okay. Which is something we may experience in the interval between things, an operational faith that carries us, that is connected to a degree to this experience of belief, but it's up for reexamination as we go. So to be present in that way is in a way, it's like, oh God, I can't find the word. It's almost like a fingerprint of being an active participant in life, not passive on the sidelines. You know what I mean? Aware and available, looking and seeing and feeling the responsibility to contribute from that place to the moment with others, and whether it's decisions around work, whether it's something coming up in family, whether it's this impending sense of something I need to do or I need to put more emphasis on. It's like, what is all that in relation to some sort of fixed reference point of belief? I mean, belief can serve as a reference point. We have to navigate life, and that's very real. And we need to protect our resources as we go and reinforce and build them, even if we can, not just expend them. Right. So, it's interesting to consider your experience of conscience, or whether sometimes we refer to it as self-knowing, or the experience of knowledge or inner knowing. Let's bring that to the fore. Let's bring that to the fore. Let's put that in the game. It's in the equation to be considered. And these quote beliefs that we may hold may evolve naturally, operationally, and serve us as opposed to fixating us. So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's something you're putting your finger on here, which is there's this notion of God doesn't care what you believe. Right? What really matters is participation. Is it's more of what am I listening to in life? Right? Am I listening to a separate mind, a separate identity of self-fulfillment and self-enrichment and, security and all these things that our minds seem to be very caught up in? Or am I actually available for a deeper expression? Right? Some people refer to this as being a vessel for a greater intelligence, a vessel for God. But fundamentally, if you look even across all religions in the world, it comes down to really service to others, right? And you kind of put your finger on this, which is that there is a calling for people to participate in life, to contribute, not from a place of, oh, I want to give this and therefore I'm going to do it because it's going to fulfill me and affirm the identity of who I think I am and I'm going to look great and everything. No, it's a humble service. It's a service that's actually given through me, not of me. So if we hold that to be true, which that might resonate with you out there who are listening to this. I know for myself, I grew up in a culturally Catholic environment in Latin America, and belief was just so overwhelmingly present, right? It was like belief is what saves you, right? And that never felt true to me. And you might resonate with that So if it's not belief exactly that saves us, in a sense that redeems us, and what is it? Is it our own ideas of what will save us? I don't think it's that either. I think it's actually participation with the presence of God in the world, and our relationship with God, and participating in what that wants to accomplish in the world. And it requires 100% of our participation, and it also requires a relinquishment of a sense of control. And I think the beliefs, in many ways, can represent a desire for control, desire for like explanation, and they can be very driven by fears. You know, so many of our beliefs are driven by, for example, the fear of death. What happens after I die, right? I mean, how many of the belief structures of humanity are driven by this fundamental need to assuage my fear of death and the beyond? Fear of meaninglessness, right? Fear of not being enough. Fear of abandonment or destitution or being alone. These are all very real, very understandable fears that we can experience, and that in very subtle ways can shape the beliefs that we choose to cling on to. So what I would propose is that beliefs, as I mentioned, they're very human quality. They are almost unavoidable. They can be conscious or unconscious. Hopefully they are conscious, and meaning I'm aware of what my beliefs are, and I'm holding them with an open palm instead of a closed fist. And the question is, are they serving? And, one way to address this is, are they serving me? Are my beliefs serving me? And this is really common, right? Like a belief, is this serving me? And is this, making me feel good and all that? No, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. Are my beliefs serving my capacity and my willingness and my desire to listen to and to experience this deeper spiritual intelligence, this direct connection to God, and from that place participate with life? That's what I mean when I ask, are my beliefs serving me? And in that sense, I think beliefs can be, they can be a window or they can be a mirror, meaning a belief can allow me to see past the walls of my very limited experience and of being a human, and with all my limitations. They can allow me a window into the greater mystery of life. They can open up, channels within me to be able to perceive more of what is, be able to be more permeable, to life, to others, to relationship, to intuition, to a sense of knowing, of recognition. That's beliefs as a mirror. But then beliefs can become, that's beliefs as a window. But then beliefs can become a mirror, which are deceivingly close to a window. And yet what they can do in that sense is they can just reaffirm who I think I am, and what I think life is, and what I think God is, and creation, and this great mysterious thing that we're going all together through, which is life, alive, being a human. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves thinking that we're looking out into life as it is, but in reality, we're just affirming to ourselves our ideas about ourselves. Wow. I mean, that is in a sense a form of hell. It reinforces this sense of being separate, of being alone. Whether we recognize it or not, we can become trapped by our beliefs. Oh, God. Even for us who perhaps have been on this journey for a long time, even those of us who reassessed and let go of beliefs in the past, I think we need to recognize that even today, there are beliefs that may be trapping us and serving as a mirror more than a window, even if they did at a certain point years ago serve as a window back then. I'm trying to point out that like a belief that actually served in that capacity in the past can almost codify itself too much in our minds. It's like the cement stopped moving and it hardened. And now it's actually an obstacle. Yeah. So the question is, are we willing to reassess it? Are we willing to make it more conscious and just hold it more lightly?
You know, what I think you're talking about is freedom. I've heard this term, and I'm sure you have too, freedom of thought. Freedom of thought in terms of belief. So it might be worth our engaging with here and there moments of space where we literally, willfully, consciously suspend beliefs. Just tell them, could you please go to the sidelines for a moment? Let's open up this space in terms of our relationship with our beliefs to the extent that we know what they are. But I mean, so let me ask you, what is freedom of thought? Freedom of thought for you in light of beliefs, just for a moment. Because I think these beliefs, operationally, these navigation points, are attempting to evolve by interacting with our experience, not just our experience, but our assessment of our experience. And so they're attempting, I think, to move with time, move forward with us and change. And I think this is a natural process that occurs. And so beliefs may grow with our experience, but it can be very disruptive. It's interesting. This week, there were two people I had the opportunity to interact with. One person was recounting their experience at 6 years of age of hearing that Santa wasn't real. And what that was, how earth-shattering that was for them in childhood. It's amazing, precious that they could recount that experience. And that's no longer true, either no longer true for me or the world is telling me it's no longer true. But we're going to have those moments where something may no longer be true for us that we held to be true. Okay. I can remember being 16 years of age, sitting in, the Catholic Mass, in a crowded church. It was a beautiful environment, actually. You could just see people resting in stillness. It was wonderful in a way. And then the priest began, and he, begins to cite the creed. Okay. And one element of which is, and I remember sitting there listening, and the room was quiet and resting. Just, I don't know, hundreds of people were there. And the priest said, Jesus is the only Son of the living God. Okay. And I sat there for a moment. I heard that. I took it in and I said to myself, my God, that's not true for me. That's not true for me. It wasn't a moment of insurrection. It was a moment of recognition. It was actually a very freeing moment in a way to say, oh, wow, that's not true for me. I didn't in that moment consider what was truth for me, but I knew that wasn't. And I felt in that moment to be freed from something. And I remember like saying, excuse me to the person next to me and just sort of standing and sort of inching my way across the pew and out to the aisle and out of the church. And it was a moment, it was just actually a really wonderful moment for which I am grateful to this day, which is, that's not true for me. Then the next question is, what is truth for you? Right? Well, that's the journey. That's the journey. And that, in fact, not chiefly, not in a central conscious fashion, but it was part of the search for what are the elements of truth that underlie my experience of life. You know, and what are those reference points, whether they are here in this world or whether they transcend this world in terms of my sense of experience and relationship. So that was very mysterious for me, but I was willing to go into that spacious, unknown environment going forward at that point in my life. So, you know, the question comes up, we talked about faith a little bit. Maybe we touch on this. Where do I place my faith? So is it in some Jesus figure out there that there's a story about? Is there something more central to me? Is there something more central to me that I can literally feel and that I need to confer with. What is that, by the way? So that unto itself compelled a journey forward, and how are things striking me? How is that? How do I see that? So there was a sort of like a renewal of personal responsibility instead of a conferral of personal responsibility. And so I think there's real value in here and there, us taking note of these operational beliefs, okay, as they are, taking note of them. And then maybe at some point, as they begin to sort of accrue, because again, many of these are subliminal. They become sort of just part of our way of navigating life and the world, but they do call to be reexamined. And ever always there's the calling for us to consider where we stand with something now, whatever that is in life. And our reference points, which are these beliefs, may factor in to where do we stand right now with something and why? Can you account for your experience? I mean, that's the calling too, because in all of our myriad interactions, whether it's on a day-to-day basis or ongoing, it's a tremendous service to present yourself as a person who's attempting to know where they're coming from, as opposed to you're just some kind of vast sort of mystery, right? That's not helpful to the people that you're interacting with. You know what I mean? So I think there's real value here in being present to some of these operational truths and to see what they are and to feel when there needs to be movement, to examine these quote beliefs, right? But at the same time, examine where do you place your faith along the way? Because that's important too. Where are you placing your faith, by the way? And where is that coming from for you? And what is life calling for from all of us? As real participants, present time right now. So this calling for self-insight and self-knowing is real. Conscience, it's real. An engaged human being, So what needs to be most deeply known versus some blind faith? What is that? So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a recognition here that I think needs to be made, which is that suspending beliefs, this practice, right, that you kind of invited us to do, which is like every once in a while, we need to, in a sense, suspend the beliefs and come back into this direct relationship and just be willing to suspend our beliefs. The first step there is to make them conscious so we even are aware of what we believe. But suspending beliefs can be extremely scary. So in a sense, I think that we need to recognize that process can engender an experience of fear. And I think it's actually a very honest fear, right? It's a fear that might be tied to, the fear that's propelling me to grasp, to hold on to this belief so strongly. But it's also the fear of, if this is not true, then what is? And that question is actually really beautiful because it represents an opening to experience what you could call revelation, in a sense, personal revelation of, if this is not true, then what is? Wow, now I'm actually open to have a new experience, to have a new realization, to have a new communication. If that opening is not there, my goodness, it's quite difficult for it to make its way into the fortress of our belief. And I think there's another piece here, which is, in order for me to be willing to do that, I need to trust in my ability to recognize truth. I need to trust in my ability to know something directly. And I think that one thing that some of the religions of the world have done is that they have cast humanity in a sort of perpetual fallen state. And that in this fallen state, we are unable to sovereignly recognize truth, to sovereignly have an experience of knowing, an experience of the divine. And I think that is hobbling us spiritually. Because in reality, we have this innate gift within us, which is our direct connection to God. And it's that which needs to be reclaimed. Now, I will caveat this by saying that needs to be approached with a lot of caution, because the truth is, while we perhaps are not in a fallen state, we are in a separate state, a state of separation, and that engenders so much confusion regarding who we are, regarding God, regarding creation, regarding purpose, regarding the purpose for our lives. I mean, we need to reconcile with the fact that we are beginning from a place of confusion regarding all of these things. And that in a sense, we are starting from a place of, to varying degrees, self-deception. We have self-deceived ourselves into thinking that we are solely a unique and special and separate individual, when in reality we're much more than that. And there's so many subtle ways in which we almost unconsciously reinforce this separate identity. So, notwithstanding that, the person who seeks to walk a true path of spiritual development, spiritual reclamation, spiritual redemption, has to go through a process of disentangling that confusion and that sense of separateness that is just present, remaining vigilant to the ways in which that self-perpetuates within us, even unknowingly, in a very powerfully way, driven by fear. But there comes a point where I think there needs to be a reclamation of our innate ability to know. Because without this reclamation of this, without this inner trust that we need to develop over time, then it would seem almost impossible for us to ask that question, if this is not true, then what is? To ask that question, I need to trust in my ability to recognize truth. So I want to highlight that piece, which is, yes, we need to be aware of the ways in which we can deceive ourselves and misperceive truth. But we need to also reclaim that ability exists within us. It is innate within us. It represents our inherent goodness and our inherent connection to God and to the divine. And we need to seek for that. And I think as we do this, we can escape the gravitational field of beliefs and our belief systems and enter the gravitational field of experience, of direct experience, of knowing. And in so doing, we become incredible contributors and incredible beings in the world, not by our own making, of course, but by the dissolution and disillusion of this separateness and this identity that we try to concretize. And beliefs can be the solidifier of that separateness. Mm. And that's why it's so important to reconsider them again and again and again.
You know, what you're describing almost requires two elements, two forces or two expressions within us, one of which is self-confidence. Okay, enough sense of self-responsibility and self-confidence, but also humility. Mm. It's a beautiful blend of these two operational forces that are calling to us. Self-confidence, accepting responsibility for, calling something for what it is as you see it and as you experience it, but also humility to consider that maybe the stance you've taken before may not fully represent the truth of the situations that you're facing. Mm. And to submit yourself to that process that calls for those two characteristics or capabilities within us, right? So self-confidence and humility. And what this now enables us to do is ferret out the unexamined beliefs. There's value in as we've been saying, recognizing and coming to terms with the beliefs we've held and whether they stay true for us, but also to ferret out the unexamined beliefs and to bring those forward and look at them and say, I'm not so sure about that now. You know what I mean? So what that is that's a powerful message that you are active in life. You are participating individually in life and taking responsibility for your realm of experience, which will engage other people. Your realm of experience will come into interface with other people, and that's an amazing chemistry unto itself. So I think that our going beyond belief and faith is almost new country. It's there for us, and there's reality and awareness that's being called. Well, awareness is being called for, and there's a reality out there that's calling for us and for others to experience. So not living in a state of faith only or hope only, but rather attempting to recognize, those handholds and those footholds as we go, and staying connected to life as we go and our condition as we go. I mean, that's important too, because being in the world comes at no cost. No, it comes at a cost, actually. And so what is that? And so what's needed there? And that's a form of self-knowing right there. Apart from all this stuff that you may hold as reference points and handholds, how are you doing the climber on the wall, the climber up the mountain, right? And so anyway, there's a calling here to engagement and awareness and personal responsibility, but also compassion for yourself as an individual attempting to really participate here in life, but feeling and experiencing your commitment to be here, I think it's real because there's a lot that challenges that. There's a lot that it actually is currently disappointing with regard to, where our world is headed and what it's facing, if not disappointing, challenging, right? So, I mean, to be active and in participation with those conditions to the extent that we're able with others is important.
Yeah. I feel like I want to put if I may, I want to put a few examples out of how beliefs can they can serve us and they can get in the way. Just to kind of see that journey, and maybe this is helpful for you. In these episodes, we always invite you to not just be an observer, but to actually go through your own process of whatever it is, the topic that we're talking about. So perhaps you have a piece of paper there or a notepad on your device, but just taking note of what's standing out to you, and perhaps even the beliefs that you hold are becoming apparent to you. But for example, like one thing that occurs to me is whether it was always present for us or it emerged at a certain point, we might have come into this notion of a belief in God, this creator, this incredible something, right? All that is this something beyond us, something incredibly powerful. The word omnipotence is thrown out there, right? And in a way, it's like, okay, well, that belief in God, which we almost can take for granted, can start out as a belief. And what can it do? It can provide us a new reference point. It can flip up within the channel of opening up my perception to see God, to see to perceive more of all that is, right? It can lead to our ability to experience the presence, capital P, of something, right? And perhaps you've experienced this as this, and maybe you've experienced it in a place of worship. Maybe you've experienced it in nature. Maybe you've experienced it in the lowest of lows in your life, or something you feel has abided with you. And by goodness, that belief in that something enabled that experience to be had. It opened up the channel for that to be had. And yet over time, or even at the outset, that belief can actually work against us. Meaning, like, belief in this greater being or something, it can lead to almost a sense of passivity or a sense of smallness that actually deactivates personal agency, or that limits parts of our intelligence, because now we're making ourselves into smallness, and so we're not actually coming into full being as we are in relationship to God. So this was just one example of like this grand notion of belief in God. It can serve, and yet it can stand as an obstacle and actually disempower. Another, for example, is, and this is very present in humanity, right? In all the different religious traditions, etc., of this world not being, and this universe even, being a temporary reality, right? This belief that we came from somewhere, came into this reality temporarily, right? We're a soul having a human experience, and we'll return to that. Or even for those who are more focused on what happens in the afterlife, the belief in heaven, the belief in something after, right? That belief can be incredibly liberating as far as keeping us in that state of fear about death and about what happens after, and about, oh my God, and what's, is this all there is? And I'm just going to die and the lights go out and it's done. And, so this understanding, this belief of, well, no, I came from a place that represents more permanence, to have a temporary experience here, and I'll return to that. Wow. How it frees us up from that and allows us to actually become more present here. And it allows us to ground ourselves in a identity that is not just, well, I'm just a physical being and I'm like an evolved ape and that's it, right? Which would be like the materialistic, earthbound notion of like, well, this is all there is, so I'm just gonna, no, there's something greater. Now I'm open to what that means. Now I'm open to encountering and engaging with and receiving a greater identity that is rooted in that reality. And yet, a belief in that reality can also disengage us from life here. Our awareness can now be stuck in what comes after, not coming back here, doing it right this time so I don't have to come back here because I want to be there, whatever there is. Now we're engaging with our ideas about that other reality instead of actually being present here. Or it can create a sense of, what's the point? Or it can create a sense of, oh, I need to be good in this life so I can get there. And it actually, you see, it actually disconnects us from being fully present to life here as it is, from recognizing that, guess what? We are in a body. We do have a mind. This is our realm of participation, and that is okay. In fact, this reality is more real to us than that reality. If we are to be honest, this is the context for our existence as we currently understand it. We can have that belief, but we can hold it consciously as a belief that enables us to have a deeper and more profound experience of the divine here in this life. Another example, even with this that we've been talking about, right? This deeper spiritual intelligence, this knowledge that we refer to. We can believe that this deeper spiritual intelligence exists, that we can believe in this notion that we have a direct connection to the Creator, to all that is, to God. We have this that God has created within us that enables us to know, and that is connected to our purpose for being here. And that if we walk with it and we listen for it, it will lead us into participation and fulfillment in a way that we couldn't have even thought of. That will bring relationships into our lives, that'll bring contribution and meaning, and a reclamation of our relationship with God. Beautiful, beautiful belief in what it can serve in that direction. And what does it do? It allows us, it opens us up to the experience of listening for that. Oh, if this exists, I listen for it. How do I experience it? How does it speak to me? I start to pay attention to what I might call my intuition. I start to trust that I might know things that are inexplicable. I start to listen for that in others. Beautiful belief. It gives rise to experience, potentially. And yet, it can also become this dynamic where I'm now relating to it as another. Well, what does knowledge want from me? Well, now I'm listening for this thing. It's almost like a knowledge, and this spiritual intelligence told me to do this. So now we're relating to it from our separate identity. When in reality, it's more pointing to this reality of who we are and our true nature. And so, strangely enough, ironically, this belief in this deeper spiritual intelligence and this deeper identity can reinforce us into this separate identity, where now we're relating to it as another thing out here. So, just a few examples of these very subtle ways that these beliefs can serve, and they can either at the outset or over time solidify themselves into something that stands in the way of experience.
Oh, that's so interesting what you're saying. I've heard the term spiritual welfare, and it's caused me to step back and say, whoa, what is that? Being myself very spiritually inclined, it seems, since childhood on, but it's like, wait a minute, what is that? Does what that mean that God will figure everything out? Spiritual welfare versus is what I and we may be experiencing is a spiritual conferral of responsibility, in partnership with what? You know what I mean? That's the question, because it feels like it's not just something that this life isn't just something that I solely have to figure out for myself. There's something that walks with me. There's this experience that I've mentioned before of conscience. There's an aspect of me that's almost looking from a slightly higher vantage point to help me see and understand and engage with what is in front of me. Okay. So with regard to faith traditions, it's worth standing back and saying, is there a reset position that we might sort of unconsciously step into, which is that, God will figure it all out, i.e. via beliefs, what we believe to be so, or not. And I know when I use the term God, this is a major sort of reality for all of us to consider, like, what is that? What are we speaking with? If you take a moment let's say in the hour, and you just consider for a moment your relationship with the divine. Just not to say that I can even describe it to you, but can you feel it? Can you feel it? It's maybe only elements of a larger dimension, perhaps, or not. But take a moment periodically and just consider your relationship with the divine. And then step back into everyday momentary life and go about your duties. It's a moment. It's great to just sort of expand the dimensions of things for just a second into the unknown and then bring it back. You know what I mean? Bring it back, because operationally, you're the one that's executing life right here and right now. Right? And so this conferral of responsibility is important versus a sense of, somebody else is taking responsibility for this and I just have to fall in line, and, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do we believe? It's something to query and ask ourselves and sort of keep so somewhat in mind. And then just so that we can begin to generate a renewed sense of awareness, okay, about ourselves and life and interaction, it might be worth as these realities come to the fore, which is what we believe and hold to be true, to take it over here, set it here, and periodically we can look at some of these beliefs. We can look at some of these beliefs and just, if nothing, be aware of them. And otherwise to consider, do they still hold to be true for us?
Yeah. What you're saying here, this practice of putting them here and just, what is it that we believe? I think that exercise, what it also enables and what it can do for us is that we make these things conscious. We actually verbalize them and place them here, put them on pause. And in a sense, that allows us to account more for our direct experience, right? Like I want to set forward this analogy, which has always just been very present for me, which is scaffolding. The way I see it is belief is like scaffolding, right? Scaffolding is the tubular structure. That's kind of set around an edifice, a building that assists with the construction of that building. It's not the building itself. And fundamentally, though the scaffolding is absolutely necessary to build a building, especially one that is meant to go high, what matters is the building. The scaffolding is in service to the building, and it shouldn't be confused with the building. In this analogy, beliefs are the scaffolding. They provide some sort of structure, which we need to be alive and to function in the world. As we've talked about, the beliefs allow for something to happen. And what is it that they allow to happen? They allow for experience to happen, direct experience of the divine, direct experience of knowing, direct experience of the spiritual intelligence, direct experience of the mystery of our lives unfolding. That's what matters. And what tends to happen, I think, is that we mistake our beliefs about something, even our beliefs about this deeper spiritual intelligence. We allow that belief almost unconsciously and subtly to replace our experience of it. So doing this exercise that you were talking about naming your beliefs, putting them here, suspending them for a moment, and just focusing on reclaiming those experiences of knowing. And what can happen over time is that increasingly, beliefs, they operate almost as like an anchor point. Something like if you want to climb somewhere, if you've climbed a tree or a wall or something, you find the places where you can get a foothold. And it's, and hopefully it's, a little ledge that can take your weight. And if you feel secure enough, you can stand on that. And standing on that allows you to reach further. Beliefs can serve that purpose. They allow us to have a greater vantage point of life, to have a new experience of direct experience. And what can happen over time as we reclaim these direct experiences of knowing is that our reference points can become those direct experiences of knowing, as opposed to the beliefs. Now the building comes into view. Now we're inhabiting the building as opposed to monkey barring our way across the scaffolding. And as we inhabit increasingly the building of our own experience and our own knowing, wow. Now we're able to, look out the windows of that building and have the vantage point from those anchor points of our own direct knowing and our own direct experience. And sometimes what happens is we go out there and we try to open that window and it bangs up against the scaffolding. You know, we try to get the breeze on the second floor and boom, we hit the scaffolding. And that might be banging up against the belief. So, you know, I love this analogy because it points to what's really important. And not just that, but what's the purpose? Because beliefs do serve a purpose. But we need to make sure that we're not confusing that with the building of experience. And we need to make sure that over time, we are reclaiming and anchoring ourselves in our experience of this deeper spiritual intelligence, in our experience of God, of the divine, of whatever terms we want to use. Because that will lead to a deeper and deeper and deeper recognition of that in our lives and a deeper trust in that. And this is where the notion of faith comes into play, right? Faith being more operational, as meaning in relation to my action and how I show up in the world. Faith is what allows me to participate in life in a certain way based on my experience of this knowing, based on my experience of God, based on something that I actually can put my foot on and can hold me in a way that allows me to participate in life in that way. Whereas belief is more conceptual, faith is more operational.
It's wonderful. So what we're advocating for here is, I feel, to stay with our original experience and condition, you know, as we participate in life, to the greatest degree possible, sense and feel how we are, what we know, what we don't, and meet the moment genuinely and in active participation, not passive participation if we're able. Rest when we can, and know that the times that we live in, perhaps they always have been, and I'm sure for participants during former times may have felt the consequence of those times, but can you feel the consequence of these times and the need for real participation at a meaningful, present-minded manner? So I think this work in self-knowledge is very valuable. It's something that we each individually, that can enrich us, you know, but also can assist others here and there, by our being more present to them and to situations that we may be engaging with in the larger world around us, and to bring our awareness of larger forces forward to each other, I think is important. Instead of being buried in circumstances only, we're each almost like an antenna, picking up on important signals. And so extend those messages to others in your engagement, you know, original engagement, being present to one another, being available to speak about and from where you are, your observations, your assessment, and what you most deeply know. And along the way, be honest about what it is you think is so, and be open to those reference points evolving and changing as needed. And that's being a real active participant in life, I feel.
Yeah, I want to feel able to just speak to folks out there that might be experiencing what might be referred to as a loss of faith or a crisis of faith. I know I've gone through those in my life, even recently. And one question to ask is, you know, loss of faith or a crisis of faith, sometimes it might be tied to a belief that's failing me. That this loss of faith that I'm experiencing is perhaps because I was placing my faith was operating based on an anchor point of belief. And so to renew one's faith, we can renew our faith by belief, and just, all right, we're going to reinforce this somehow. Or we can renew it based on experience. And part of that requires us to go and reclaim these experiences. In a sense, I think faith invokes a deeper trust. That's a word that I feel can be associated with faith. There's a trust, and it's not just this blind trust. It's not just a trust based on a notion or a belief. It's a trust based on, when I've done this, when I've followed this, when I've listened to this, when I've shown up to life in this way, this is what it's led to. So I'm going to trust in this and allow myself to participate with life from that place. Another thing, I think those who are watching this might resonate, right? Which is, we're seeking truth in our lives, truth about what we must do. We're seeking to become more self-honest. We're seeking to end this illusion of separation to the degree that we can in this life. We're seeking to become contributors and participants in life from this deeper place. And yet I think there's a underlying recognition here, which is that ultimate truth is beyond human estimation. It's beyond human thoughts. It's beyond human concepts, beyond human language. It's like all human thought is an estimation. And that estimation can be either closer or further away. It can help us approach ultimate truth. It can help lead us away. So belief is a part of being alive. And if our yearning, if our longing, if our desire and our intention is to reconnect with this deeper spiritual intelligence, to reconnect with God, or whatever term best fits for how you refer to this great mystery, then we must recognize that whatever beliefs we do hold, they're an estimation. And in that, we can perhaps loosen our grip on them. I think that's part of the journey. So, hopefully this is helpful. And I hope that my hope is that increasingly, I know this is a hope for myself, that I can relate to life as it is and not as I think it is. And I am so wary of, I'm so aware of the ways in which I can self-deceive myself, even with the most spiritual notions and beliefs. What I value is experience. What I value is presence. So I know I'll continue to assess my beliefs as I move forward in this journey.
Oh, definitely. And I'd just like to say that be open to the experience of certainty arising as you go. I'd like to read this brief statement. This is from Steps to Knowledge, the Book of Inner Knowing. Allowing uncertainty to exist means there is a great faith. This means that another form of certainty is arising. So this is an ongoing process of experience that we may be having by degrees, whether we recognize it or not. And so what we're calling for is to bring forward this process of certainty, potentially coming together, assembling itself in our experience to the point where it can almost be a footstep or a handhold as we go forward in life. And maybe it may go forward with us and or it may transform itself almost within hand. You know what I mean? And so that there's power in our engagement at the level of self-knowing and self-experience, and at the same time engagement with life in the world as it is and as it's presenting itself to us and to others, and to being present and involved and engaged and in the game. And so that's what we're calling for, is not to park a large part of our experience in the subliminal sidelines, but rather bring some of it into the fore, into the game itself, so that we actually have implements to work with to help make sense of what we're experiencing and what's evolving in the world. Right.
Beautiful. Well, on that note, let's bring it to a close. We'll see you all in a new year in January for another episode. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Patricia.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.